Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
Thank you, everybody, for joining with us today. This is the first session of many to come of the Calibration Point Podcast series provided by J.D. Levy and Associates. And today we have a great guest with us, Chuck Wills, who is the CEO of the Mary E Ober Foundation. Chuck has a vast experience from development and fundraising to technology and creative design, and brings a really unique perspective into the foundation world. Chuck is a longtime friend, his foundation is a client, and I've just always been fascinated in what I've learned from him over the years because of the blend of experience that he brings and being able to navigate that into the foundation world, especially as a highly strategic family foundation. So Chuck, normally when we would interview someone and talk about grant making, one of the questions that I hear a lot anyway is, can you tell us what a great relationship looked like with a foundation from your perspective, or what were things that hallmarked some of your best partnerships? And I'd like to maybe make this a little less orthodox and go to the opposite side. Can you tell us about one of the worst relationships that you've ever had as a grant maker?
I sure can. First of all, Jamie, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So, I have some examples of great relationships, fortunately, but you want to hear the bad ones first, huh?
We do.
Okay. There are two that come to mind, and I'll try to be brief because I could probably say a lot about it. The first one was a social services organization serving youth. I'll try to keep it anonymous here. We were looking for organizations that did a particular thing in southern Indiana, and this organization seemed to fit that pretty well. And so I had reached out to them to find out more about how their program worked, how they were working with this population, and things were looking pretty good. And in fact, they reached out to us for some quasi-emergency funding, to bridge funding, they called it. And we thought, all right, things are looking pretty great. As we explore what they're doing in southern Indiana, we will give them a little bit of bridge funding for what they were doing in Indy. Everything seemed to fit. And the check cleared, and suddenly there was no more communication. And I was really needing the information about what they were doing in southern Indiana. I owed that information to other people. We were trying to build this collaboration around what they were doing, and suddenly this organization communication evaporated. And I sent out emails, and I called. Calls weren't returned, emails weren't returned. Finally, almost 6 weeks later, I got a reply to an email that said, well, that person isn't here anymore, and I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wow.
And that person that I'd been trying to communicate with was their development chief. And the person that finally replied to me was their brand new director of the region. So everybody that I had communicated with was gone. The new people knew nothing. And, hey, that happens. But the new people were particularly disinterested in anything that I had to talk to them about. Oh, well, we're not really doing anything in southern Indiana. I'm not sure what those people before me were talking about. And that was the end of it.
Wow.
Then, it was brutal. And so I had to go to the people that I had intended to work with and say, well, we're back to the drawing board. Now, oddly enough, I get a voicemail literally a week ago from somebody in Illinois saying, "Hey, I'm a grant writer for such and such organization, and we wondered if we could submit something."
Hmm?
So
Oh
I took a deep
my.
breath. I took a deep breath and didn't say the first things that came to mind. And I said, "Look, we had the beginnings of a great relationship 18 months ago, and that crashed and burned because your organization, had some rocky leadership problems, but then just let everything go out of the frying pan into the fire. So before you can submit anything to us, your leadership needs to call me directly, and so we can talk about, a little bit about what happened. Let's do an autopsy here on this, but figure out what does this relationship look like going forward, because it won't look like what it looked before. We gave you guys money and you blew us off big time. And
Wow.
that was a week ago, and I've had no further communication from them.
So all of this happened then after you had made the grant to them, and it sounds
Yeah.
like you didn't arbitrate pressure for that grant to be returned. You allowed them to continue to use it, which is amazing from a funder's perspective. And then to have
Yeah.
them reapproach you again, now only 2 weeks ago, is amazing.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I didn't ask for the money back was it was bridge funding, so I knew it was spent. And they do, one way or another, address a cause that we care about.
Right.
So, it was not a life-changing amount of money. And so, we care about youth, we care about the cause that they serve. So let's just let it go
Right.
and chalk it up to experience. There was very little that we could do, short of calling their national headquarters, and it was not worth it.
What you're saying, Chuck, one of your biggest critical elements in a healthy relationship is good communication and their willingness to communicate openly with you, and to maintain that, which is really important, because I think there is often a misnomer in this field that foundations operate kind of in a silo somewhere, and that they aren't about driving fluid and more intimate communication back with grantees. Yet we see the trends of even some of the largest foundations that have gone to a personal contact only approach. And I would say, as strategic as your family foundation is, what you're highlighting then is the communication really is of essence.
Well, and I think an important aspect of that is the communication can't be transactional. I don't have time or capacity for transactional communication. It really needs to be relational. Um, a lot of people boil this sector down to transactions. Our foundation is a grant maker, and we exist to write checks. Well, mechanically, yes, but in reality, we are here to build partnerships and relationships and collaborate on the causes that we care about. And when I think of the great relationships that we have, we are truly collaborators. Um, that's how it works best. And if we boil it down to the transaction of, we're check writers and you're going to call me when it's time for another check, that's not going to work. That doesn't work for us because that is not strategic. Um, and our value is greater than what's in our balance sheet, really.
Excellent point, that your true impact is not just coming from money that you release into the field, but it's coming from the relationship and the experiential and social capital that you bring to the table as a partner. And Chuck, you mentioned a great word, and that was collaboration. And when you look at the word collaboration versus, say, coercion or cooperation, that can also be used in terms to describe grant maker relationships. Collaboration really denotes that, I'm not getting on your boat or you're getting on my boat, that we truly are co-owning a cause, and that we are aligned and both mobilizing one another to do greater things. And so it is refreshing to hear you use the term collaborative partnership or collaboration with your grantees, just because of there are so many, I believe, wrong conceptions about what foundation relationships are in the field, and often we approach them with an incorrect bias, to your point, and a funder often can end up being seen as just a checkbook.
Sure. Well, and honestly, it's the best way to say it is not every relationship works. Not every relationship can be a collaboration because it takes a real alignment. We can talk about aligning with values and aligning on the cause that we serve, but there has to be a real value of that collaborative aspect between the grant maker and the grantee. And not everybody is built for that. And that's okay. That's okay. I understand that there can be some magnificent organizations out there doing amazing things, and they may not fit as a close collaborator for us. And that's okay. A lot of the grant work that we do is not really based on uh, funding a particular program. And I know that a lot of grant makers work that way. We identify a program that we like and we fund that program, and then we evaluate it at the end of the year, and then we fund that program again the next year. A lot of our collaborative relationships look a lot more casual than that, honestly, because it's about having a deep relationship where our contact can call us up and say, this is what is going on. Um, maybe we're not identifying this thing as a particular program. Maybe it's a collection of programs. Maybe it's something that's not program at all.
I think we're following you in that collaboration is really critical for change, and we have to move past a time in which grantees or potential grantees operated in separate boats from those that were trying to make a difference in the field by funding the field. And that, to your point, looks many different ways beyond just program impact, but also building capacity and strategic development, which is really refreshing, again, I think, for many people in the field, just realizing that maybe we've underestimated the power in relationship with grantees and grantors and connecting them in true collaborative relationships that co-own and co-mobilize for a cause. Chuck, I think building off of that, we've got a few minutes remaining. I would love to hear for our audience, based on that quick thinking and how you see things through your lens, do you have Chuck's big three? If you were going to tell those that are in the field, whether you're approaching Kellogg or whether you're approaching the Mary E Ober Foundation, what are the big three for you when it comes to things that grantees ought to remember when they are thinking about relationships with a foundation, or specifically your foundation?
Sure. I think that number one, I'm going to put it under the label of be concise in your communication, but it's really more than that. In many ways, every day I am overwhelmed with communication. My inbox overfloweth. And so don't communicate with a foundation the same way that you communicate with all of your other donors. Hopefully there's a grand collection of individuals that you have funding your organization, and they can get newsletters, they can get more anonymous forms of communication, and feel free to put a foundation on your newsletter. That's great, but also understand we're probably not going to use that newsletter as the primary source of information on your organization. And when I look at our strongest relationships, I probably talk to their executive director or director of development a couple times a year, and we're pretty targeted in what we talk about. and they understand what we are looking for as a foundation. What are the things that we want to see move in this community? How can they help that happen? Man, let's get to the point. Let's get to the point. How are we going to use our relationship to move this forward?
So be concise. And it sounds like another one that you've just hit, and I'm not trying to put thoughts in, but it's one you've already mentioned, but how can you use the shared relationship to move the cause forward, which is a really powerful thought. Exactly. Number one, be concise. And number two, what would you tell us?
Connect everything to outcomes. I am always happy to hear about outputs. You know, we served 500 meals. We helped 50 homeless kids. That's good for context, but the real heart of the matter is what's the change? You know, what are the real outcomes that you are seeing from this work? And if you can connect it to that, you're really going to move things forward in this relationship.
Okay, so be consistent, connect to outcomes, and what will be your third?
Just to be blunt, we're not a bank. And funding is not automatic every year and shouldn't be expected every year. And even with our closest relationships, there's no guarantee that they're going to get funding year after year. It depends on the strength of what they intend to do for, that period of time. And I suppose this is another way of restating what I said earlier, talking about transactional relationships. We are relational. We are not transactional. And we've had a lot of different organizations come to us, kind of saying, "Hey, it's June again. How you doing?" And that doesn't work very well for us.
Right. Sounds like from what you're saying, kind of how the old song goes, RSPECT, respect the relationship, and respect that you have a focus on building aligned relationships. And to your point, you're not a bank. Excellent point. Thank you, Chuck. We really appreciate your time with us, and thank you everyone for listening in. And we will have another Calibration Point podcast series coming up in the future.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.